the very pointy steeple of Hever Church in Kent, where Anne Boleyn's father is buried.
Is it open? Yeah, it's open. Let's have a look. To the front of the church where the altar is, and then just on the other side is the tomb of Anne Boleyn's father. Obviously been damaged because it's bricked up at the side. The church floor has been raised at some point. And then just at the side over here, this is the tomb of one of his young sons. And you've got the cross screwed in here. And the little inscription. This is the only way that we know that Anne Boleyn had another two brothers who died young. So look, it's not a very big grave, is it? It's quite small. It must have been a baby, mustn't it? Very, very young child from the size of the stone here. There's the H, E, N, R and the Y. The son of Thomas Boleyn. No date on here. But as the floor's been raised, I assume that this has been raised too. Let's continue looking at what else I found out about this. Thomas is not the only Boleyn buried in the church. Henry Boleyn, son of Sir Thomas, thought to have died in infancy, is buried near his father. His tomb is marked by a brass cross. And I did see this when I was there with the writing. There is no date on this when he died at all, just the name, which is interesting. I'm a bit interested to know how many brasses did not include dates of death in the inscriptions. I really would like to know that. Anyway, this is then talking about the other brass of Margaret Cheyne. In the vicinity of Hever are two small graves that tell us that Thomas had sons who died young. One is at rest in the tall-inspired St. Peter's Church at Hever, Henry. 3 miles away in the Sidney Chapel of the Church of Penshurst is a small flat gravestone on which a cross is gradated in brass with the following inscription: Thomas Boleyn, son of Sir Thomas Boleyn. This is an article by Alison Weir about Anne Boleyn's brothers. So we know that at Penshurst and Hever there are two smaller graves. They're much smaller. I don't know, they're sort of about this big, I guess, with a cross on and a little monumental inscription on. Neither of them state the date that the person died, but they're really similar styles. And Alison Weir's just talking here in this article on H for history. It's often claimed that two of Anne Boleyn's brothers died of infants. The cross brass of young Thomas Boleyn in Penshurst Church describes him as the son of Thomas Boleyn, who was knighted in 1509. Thus Thomas must have died after that date. Henry's grave is marked by another cross brass adjacent to his father's tomb in Hever Church. The fact that there were two similar cross brasses suggests that the boys may have died around the same time. I mean, it could be that he died before 1509, could it? And then the brass was put in later, calling him Sir Thomas Boleyn. They're just talking about the ages when they were born. Sir Thomas Boleyn later stated that his wife had borne a child every year up to at least 1505. They had married between 1495 and 1498. Given that Anne Boleyn was born around 1501, which some people dispute, but that's what they think. Her sister Mary, who was older, was born in 1500 or earlier. Thomas, named after his father and perhaps grandfather, the Earl of Surrey, was almost certainly the eldest son, born in 1499 or earlier, which would certainly make sense. And Henry, perhaps named for King Henry VII, may have been the second, born in 1500 or earlier. George Boleyn was the youngest of the three surviving siblings. He was described by George Cavendish, Cardinal Wolsey's gentleman usher, as being under 27 when he was preferred to the Privy Council in 1529, so he must have been born in 1502 at the earliest, or 1503. Thomas Boleyn's heir and namesake lived until after 1509. Well, they're assuming that because of the name. It is probably fair to say that Henry Boleyn was probably still alive when George was born in 1502-3, as had he not been, his third son would probably also have been named after the king or after Thomas. I think that's probably true. When George was born, his brothers were probably both still alive, because some children were named after their dead sibling. They could be like you see on some graves where three people have the same name, the children, like John, John and John, because the first two Johns died. The fact that Thomas was buried at Penshurst suggests he had been placed in the household of the Duke of Buckingham, the traditional route to knightly rank. He's not being carried the short distance from Rennet Hever suggests he was buried quickly, which made me wonder if he had died during the outbreak of the sweating sickness in 1517, but the tombs are so small, I think these must be infants. It was at one time claimed that Sir Thomas Boleyn sent his son George to be educated among the Oxonians, but that's unlikely because between 1500 and 1600 records show that the age to enter Oxford University was invariably 17. George was only about 11, became page to the king soon after, holding the post until 1524, so it's unlikely he went to university at all. A Master Boleyn took part with his father in the revels at court at the Christmas season of 1514-15. It could have been George or his elder brother Thomas, plus it was probably Henry who was sent to Oxford with a view to a career in the church. I don't think those two boys were older, I just don't think they were. I think they died as children. I don't know anywhere in this time when you would be given such a small gravestone if you died as an adult. I don't know where I've seen that before. Okay, let's carry on looking at these articles in that I've got. So this is on the Anne Boleyn Files again. This is about the lost Boleyns, Thomas and Henry Boleyn. These are the two brothers of Anne Boleyn, the two sons of Thomas Boleyn and his wife Elizabeth Boleyn, formerly Howard. This is from 2011. You may remember my post a few weeks ago about that Thomas Boleyn the Younger, brother of Anne Boleyn, buried at St John the Baptist Church, Penshurst. There is Penshurst. I visited this grave years ago, not been for a long time. I feel like I should pay a little visit, really. In that post, I explained that author and historian Alison Weir was claiming in her latest book, Mary Boleyn, the Great and Infamous Whore, that this Boleyn brother did not die in infancy but actually lived until adulthood and died in 1520. We're based on a conclusion on the following evidence. Thomas's tomb is marked by a cross on the date 1520. He was named after his father and grandfather and therefore must have been the eldest son. So Anne Boleyn Files is just saying, as I explained before, I was puzzled by this conclusion, as I've always believed that Thomas's tomb was that of an infant, just like his brother Henry Boleyn's at St Peter's Church, which is a tiny tomb marked by a simple cross, yeah. As someone who is researching the Boleyns on a daily basis for the Anne Boleyn Files and my book, I just couldn't let this rest. So I made it my mission to find out more about the lost Boleyns. I really like somebody who is like a dog with a bone, because I'm like that, so I like it. And I don't know if the person who runs the Anne Boleyn Files is like an academic or just probably an amateur historian like me. I don't hate the word amateur though, because, you know, often... it's not being amateurish at all, is it? Because you can find out so much if you're so interested in something. Anyway, so they're saying that with the help of the friend Claire Cherry, who's written a book on George Boleyn, the brother that did survive, all of this blew up while I was on the Anne Boleyn experience in July. I love it. It blew up. I love it. And Claire was one of the participants on this tour. Claire and her trusty sidekick David had told me they were visiting Penshurst Place after the tour, so I asked if they'd be interested in visiting the church. So off they went to Penshurst. Oh yeah, that's right, because there's a different design, isn't it? It's slightly different because this one is on like a raised steps leading up to a cross, so it is a bit different to the one in Hever. In this beautiful church, Claire, David, Tim and I visited the tomb of little Thomas Boleyn in the Sidney Chapel. It was very moving to see this tiny tomb. So yeah, it's a very simple brass plate inscribed with Thomas Boleyn, the son of Thomas Boleyn. No date, no other information. So here again it says, across to Thomas Boleyn, infant brother of Anne Boleyn, who died in 1520. So then Anne Boleyn Files, email Alison Weir, and I will say, years and years ago, I did write to Alison about the Howard children, and she replied to me. I think she's very good with sharing her evidence and how she knows about things and communicating with people who are reading her books. So certainly for me, from all that time ago, when she probably wasn't as big as she is now. Anyway, so the Anne Boleyn Files contact Alison Weir to ask about the 1520 date, contact the author of the Church Guide about the 1520 death date, and research parish records for Sir Thomas Boleyn's death date. I mean, I love it. This is what I'm doing about Thomas Boleyn's grave itself. Right, so the results of initial investigations. Alison Weir emailed me straight back. No, good old Alison Weir, see, she does. There is a record of the date of the brass in the Ashmolean Museum, the same as the church leaflet. Clare managed to track down David Lough, is it? Author of the Church Guide book, and asked about the date and explained what it was based on. So in the year 1522, Sir Thomas Boleyn was appointed Keeper of Penshurst Place by Henry VIII, following the property's reversion to the Crown after the execution for treason of its previous owner, the Duke of Buckingham. According to Penshurst Church, it seems likely that the infant Thomas fell ill during one of his father's visits as keeper to Penshurst Place from his own nearby Hever Castle. He admitted that Clare probably knew far more about the Boleyns than he did. I mean, this is a great little blog. Right, so parish records. Unfortunately, Clare found that these only went back as far as 1558, so they were no help. All this was very interesting, but left with more questions than answers. I was puzzled that Alison Weir was claiming that Thomas Boleyn the younger's tomb was that of an adult, yet saying that Henry Boleyn's at Hever, which was identical in size and design, was that of an infant. On the other hand, Claire and I were also both bemused by the idea that Elizabeth Boleyn was still producing babies in 1520 at the age of around 40. Well, she could quite easily have been doing that, couldn't she? I went back to the Ashmolean records and used their bibliography and list of sources for monumental brasses to find the records for Thomas Boleyn the younger's brass. And then she found the following. Oh, it's interesting. The cross was partly restored. There's the other one. Look, you can see it's just it is slightly different style, isn't it? It's made us wonder if the brass crosses were placed on the tombs at a later date. Yeah, perhaps when the family had the means and inclination to mark these tombs in a fitting manner. I'm just looking at this though. What does it say about that restored tomb? Penshurst. Small cross partly restored. Hever, small cross restored. Yeah, look, because that is an odd shape, isn't it? All of that cross is new, isn't it? Let me look at the other one. So the steps go up. I'm just wondering if, when it says restored, maybe this was on the steps as well. And they've just replaced the whole cross. Because even looking at it, they look a bit more like screws, aren't they? Maybe all of that is later. Anyway, let's carry on. After all this digging, Mission Lost Boleyn seemed to come to a standstill. Claire and I concluded that the size and style of the tomb suggest that Thomas and Henry Boleyn were indeed infants, and that the circa 1520 date was the date of the brasses rather than the date of the death. I mean, how do they know it was 1520? What have they... Who's dated those with the crosses? Just makes you think, doesn't it? I wonder if there are any crosses in the brass books I've got to see if you could find anything similar. Anyway, the fact that Thomas Boleyn the younger was buried at Penshurst rather than at Hever had been bothering us, but Claire wondered if the renovation work that Thomas Boleyn carried out at Hever after he inherited it in 1505 forced the family to stay away with their friend and relative the Duke of Buckingham at nearby Penshurst. Perhaps little Thomas died while they were staying there, we just don't know. You may be wondering why I'm telling you all this when it's been a few weeks since I published my articles on Thomas Boleyn's tomb. Well, Claire found mention of the controversy on Alison Weir's website, her page about her latest book on Mary Boleyn. Alison says, but one person has emailed me recently to say that there is no date on the brass, and that is obviously Anne Boleyn Files. She then goes on to explain that she did further research after the one person emailed her. That's me, they're saying. I'm quite enjoying this article. Sorry, I'm just reading it if you're bored by it, but I'm finding it quite interesting. Tom Home informed Weir that there was no date on the brass, but I know there's no dates on it. I saw him in the 90s. I've always known there's no dates on it. And that the late John Flower surmised that this Thomas Boleyn was born at Penshurst after his father, so Thomas Boleyn became keeper. Weir dismissed this line of argument because this was not until April 1522, so that theory cannot be correct. Yeah, it just seems really unlikely. So Weir then concludes that the brass must date after June 1509 because it describes Thomas Boleyn the younger as son of Sir Thomas Boleyn, and Thomas Boleyn the elder was not knighted until June 1509. But that doesn't mean that they put them in later, does it? It doesn't mean that it's retrospective. So this is saying brasses were often small even for adults, so the size of this brass does not necessarily indicate that Thomas Boleyn died in infancy. Indeed, he is likely to have been the eldest son, and if he was the son who went to Oxford University at 17, then he must have been born in the mid to late 1490s. After studying at Oxford, it's possible he entered the household of the Duke of Buckingham, which might explain his burial at Penshurst. Buckingham, of course, was executed in 1521. Look, that is true, brasses were really small, but the tomb slabs were not. So I don't think this is correct. Weir also states that she contacted the Ashmolean Museum to find out the date. No one knows where the date of 1520 comes from because Dr. Eleanor Stanley has kindly stated her belief that the brass has been dated on stylistic grounds to circa 1520. But Dr. Stanley does not know where this information came from. Yeah, I just think it sounds rubbish because we don't know. Who dated it stylistically? A cross marks the undated brass of Thomas's brother Henry and Hever, which has also been dated, probably on stylistic grounds, to 1520. It is, of course, possible that both boys lived into early manhood. I don't think it is because the stones are too small. Two cross brasses of similar date might indicate they died around the same time. No. Now, visitors to the Anne Boleyn Files over the past 2.5 years know that I don't participate in author-historian bashing. Well, and that I'm always respectful of them, no matter how much I disagree with them. However, I'm finding it hard to take Alison Weir seriously on this matter. Oh dear, this sounds a bit brutal, doesn't it? Here are the reasons why I've lost a little of my former respect for her. Oh, I think this is going a bit far, isn't it, over this one brass thing? But anyway, as for the whole Oxford issue, there are no records to confirm his attendance there or that of another Boleyn sibling, as far as I know. Where is the evidence? Surely a son born in the mid to late 1490s who joined the Duke of Buckingham's household would be mentioned. Well, who knows? The 1509 Sir Thomas Boleyn argument. Weir argues that the tombs must date after 1509 because the inscriptions refer to Sir Thomas Boleyn as their father. This can be explained by the brasses being placed on the tombs later. Yeah, no, absolutely, I'd say that too. I didn't hear anything further from Alison Weir. When people point out an error that I have made in my work or a theory that just isn't backed up by the evidence, then I thank them and share them anything else I find on the issue. Oh dear, I'm disappointed that Alison Weir refers to me on her website as one person. Oh dear. Please believe me when I say that I've not written this to discredit Alison Weir's work or her reputation in any way. I just cannot agree with her theory on Thomas Henry Boleyn. Well, I mean, I think Alison Weir is wrong, to be fair. But don't lose any respect for Alison Weir. I am puzzled, bemused, and a little cross about the whole thing. Oh, don't be cross. I hope she's not cross now. This website is all about the real truth about Anne Boleyn, and that includes her family. What Weir has written as fact is actually supposition, and I cannot support it. Well, I mean, no, I don't think it is correct. Oh, this is interesting, though, here. This is the floor of the Sidney Chapel in Penshurst. And there is, you can see, look, one of the big tombs there. And then look how small Thomas Boleyn's cross is. Oh, it's tiny. It's really small. It's to a child. These lost Boleyns are still lost, and there's still a mystery. There's no date on their tombs. They're not named any records, so we just don't know. This is on Alison Weir's website. Let's have a little look at that. The text of the book was revised for the second edition to take account of this new research. I still don't agree with her research because they are children, but that's interesting, isn't it? Wow. This is an article from 2013. They're studying Thomas and George Boleyn. So this person actually in this article asks, is there any historical information on Thomas Boleyn's deceased sons Thomas and Henry? How old were they died, cause of death, relationships with the surviving children? She's just saying, mystery surrounds these two Boleyn children, Henry and Thomas, one buried near his father at Hever and the other in the Sidney Chapel at Penshurst. Yeah, she's just saying, why would a Boleyn be buried in Penshurst at that stage? She's saying again, it's a popular theory that these two Boleyns died as young men. I don't think it is a popular theory, is it? And while there is no evidence to support such an argument, the size of the brass does not necessarily indicate a child. I'm sure that it means they were children. Not the size of the brass, the size of the slab. There is no mention of a Henry or Thomas Boleyn of this generation in any record, and it's therefore more than likely that they never reached adulthood. Yeah, okay, I'd agree with that. So on this article from 2013, Claire Ridgway, who does the Anne Boleyn Files, she has talked about the brasses of Henry and Thomas Boleyn, and you can see she's got images of the two here, which we have looked at, but look, side by side you can clearly see that they're so similar, aren't they? And the whole shape of this brass here on this stepped platform and this one here, this just shows that this is all a replacement, isn't it? This bit here was clearly, or I'm assuming, I say clearly, the same as that originally. So that is all new. Claire Ridgway contacted the Monumental Brass Society. The Society's Kentish expert replied saying, the Boleyn crosses are two one-offs of the same design. There was a small workshop in Kent around 1500 to 1530-35 which produced some rather low quality brasses with a very debased script style. Most of them are listed by Mill Stevenson, who was an old expert on monumental brasses, as I've discovered, as local. The design was never a style, just a bit of Kentish localism. The earlier cross brasses of the 14th century in particular were of course high quality, mainly London work for priests. The Boleyn examples are almost certainly to children. I checked my copy of Mill Stevenson's A List of Monumental Brasses in the British Isles, and it did indeed say local in its records of the two brasses. So the Monumental Brass Society, who were experts on brasses, dated these brass crosses to 1500 to 1535 and believe that they mark the tombs of children. I think it's safe to say that circa 1520 was chosen as a date for Mill Stevenson's book and the Church Guide book because it was in the middle of the period. Yeah, the boys died in infancy or early childhood. Yeah, completely. I agree with this. I mean, this stepped cross business. Well, anyway, something else to research as well.